It's time to get rowdy with Rusty this week in wrestling on That Way Cool Wrestling Show Breakout.
Hello, it's time once again for another edition of That Way Cool Wrestling Show Breakout, episode number 15, 15, double digits. And today we have a different way of doing things. Today we're going to have a talk show on the state of the NWA, National Wrestling Alliance, with producer, podcast extraordinaire of That Way Cool Wrestling Show, and my boss, Danny J. Danny J., welcome into the house, my brother.
Thank you for having me on the show. What a wonderful day it is. And we're going to talk about the National Wrestling Alliance, something I hold very dear to my heart. I was rooting for them for this whole first year of everything they're doing here. And obviously since the beginning when they were bought out. And I was very excited about things that are going on. And we're going to talk about a lot of stuff today because they are, I think in both of our opinions, screwing up a little bit. So we're going to get into it, and I think it's going to be a fun show today.
Absolutely. Let's just recap here. For many years, Jim Crockett Promotions was considered the main NWA promoter. And then when Jim Crockett Promotions had some financial troubles, sold out in 1988, Ted Turner purchased Jim Crockett Promotions. And for 1 year, from 88 to like 89 or the first part of 90, I think, Ted Turner was a member of the NWA. And then he pulled out, changed over to WCW, World Championship Wrestling. And then the NWA pretty much went dormant, for lack of a better term. And nobody heard of it. It was just it was still around technically.
There's a lot of indie, you know what it was? It was a lot of indie stuff. At that time, I was doing a lot of production of indie wrestling, and I was doing a lot of backstage stuff. And you had NWA New Jersey, you had NWA Wildside was a big one. So a lot of it stayed regional, a lot of it stayed territorial. But what you're talking about is that they weren't in the limelight anymore, really. And there wasn't television deals or anything like that. And it became a scenario where, much like a Subway, NWA became a franchise. And it was one of the only ways for any upstart indie promotion to kind of get any kind of backing was to join the NWA as their moniker. So it ended up being a backing thing more than anything else.
True, but to the downside of that, anybody and anybody's uncle that could pay the membership, whatever that was, to the NWA, basically could be a member of the NWA, even if that person never had any television or any kind of other financial backing to run a decent promotion. So therefore, even though technically the NWA was around, the NWA really wasn't around to most people.
That's right.
And so basically it was alive, but it died, if that makes sense.
Well, with Billy Corgan, when he purchased the NWA, what he noticed was, aside from a few here and there, a lot of it was the children running the roost, in a sense. So a lot of indie feds, because they had the NWA moniker, they paid their dues to the NWA. They kind of did whatever they wanted. Okay. And they weren't being governed really by any governing body or anything like that. They kind of stayed under the radar and they were doing their thing. And when Billy Corgan came in and bought the entire NWA and said, listen, this is what we're going to do. I have a vision for this and we're going to do this. And everybody who's in line with this, it's going to be business as usual. If you're not in line with this, I need you to get in line with this. If not, no hard feelings, but you're not going to have your NWA franchise anymore. So he canceled all the franchises, and only those who kind of were like, I agree with your vision with this, and I'll follow your way, were able to stay. And that's like Championship Wrestling of Hollywood and amongst others, but a lot of indie feds lost their backing because of that.
Sure, sure. And also Billy and his partner Dave Lagana at the time. Dave recently resigned for reasons we won't get into now,
Right.
but Dave and his partner had a vision of the championships that they wanted to have. Like they have the NWA World title held by Nick Aldous. They have the NWA World Tag Team titles held by Tom Latimer and Royce Isaacs at the moment, as of this recording. And
No, I don't think it is. I think
okay.
it's not. It's Eli Drake and
Oh yeah, Eli Jake and James Storm.
James Storm. Yeah.
Yeah, sorry, they had a title change right before
Yeah.
the
Right before the break.
pandemic.
Yeah.
Yeah, and then the TV champ is your a guy that you're going to have on the show at some point, Zicky Dice.
Zicky Dice. I love him. I love him.
Yes, I certainly hope.
He's great.
I hope you get that show together real soon, and if you need somebody to piggyback on there, I'd be glad to do that as well. But what I'm saying is, so Billy Corgan took over in 2017.
Yeah.
And got a lot of good momentum. Unfortunately, they're still on YouTube only, and they don't have a TV contract. Danny, do you see the NWA losing some momentum here, not just because of the pandemic, but because of the fact that they don't have a broadcast network like AEW does?
Well, going back to what you just said, he bought it in 2017. Okay, that was 3 years ago.
Okay.
And it was a long, slow ride to get to where we were to have it on YouTube. Okay. There was a lot of promising of what's going to happen with the NWA, and nothing was happening. And then there was no news. And then you're like, oh, he's on tour with Smashing Pumpkins. So what is he doing with the NWA? And like you saw a lot of different stuff where there wasn't anything happening for a while. And I understand you're restructuring, you got to get things back together so you can start off with something good. But it was one of those things where as quick as, wow, the NWA is coming back was around, it very quickly went away as well, because of the fact that there was nothing going on. So once he started doing those, the 10 pounds of gold episodes on YouTube.
Yeah, the documentary
stuff. Yeah, and I watched a couple here and there, but you know what? I was like, as a fan of wrestling, but not knowing most of the workers that were being used at that time, I wasn't very interested in that sense. In a lot of it, in some cases, like a lot of the Tim Storm stuff I was into, because he's a very impressive wrestler. But as far as a lot of the other stuff, I was like, I could really care less. This is not really giving me any interest. And it's like, when someone gives you something to hold you over until the real thing happens, it's never as good as what you want. So the eyebrow goes up and it goes right back down again.
It's like you're getting a kiss on a date and you think more is going to happen, but more doesn't happen.
It doesn't happen at all. The door is closed right in front of you.
I know it's a family show, so I'll leave that alone. But anyway,
so I mean, a couple of things. Not to cut you off, but a couple of things I wanted to get into, because I love what they're doing with the studio. Studio wrestling is something we all grew up with. It's something that I love dear to my heart. 6:05 on Saturday nights. I didn't leave until 8:05 to go out with my friends because I had to watch World Championship Wrestling. You know what I mean? From the NWA. It was some of the greatest stuff. And that family feel of having the fans right there with no guardrails and having like the it's like there's very limited time of where they're like they're on a TV time type of thing. And it was just a very cool feel because it made you feel like you were right there in a sense.
True.
So I drew to that immediately when I saw the studio wrestling come back with NWA Power. And I'm saying, all right, let's check out some of the guys they got here and some of the guys I've seen before, like Josephus and they brought in the Rock and Roll Express, who were like 116 years old at this point, and they're multiple time grandfathers at this point. You know what I mean?
Yes.
Like sometimes I say enough's enough, but whatever. God bless them that
Yeah.
they can still work.
Yeah.
And but one of the things I got like a little, I wasn't always a fan of Old Charlotte, but the newer version of Old Charlotte that Nick Aldous holds now, I like a lot better than the original, because the original was a very flat plate championship belt. I didn't think it was very impressive.
Yeah, it still had the dome globe on the flat plate, but this plate seems to be more, I don't know if curved is the right way.
Yes,
or
it is. Yeah, it's more
Okay,
curved.
curved.
And I think the whole thing is three-dimensional. So it's not just the dome that's coming out. The whole thing kind of comes out. And I think it's a more impressive belt. So that I kind of liked. When they brought in their national heavyweight title, which I was a fan of that. I used to love seeing like Tully Blanchard and Wahoo McDaniels hold that belt. The belt that they're using as the national heavyweight title is one of the original United States heavyweight championship belts. It's not the national title.
I was getting ready to say that. If you don't mind me jumping in here.
Yeah, go right ahead.
I agree with you. I agree with him using the national heavyweight title. I agree with him using the U.S. title. But if you're going to call it a national title and you're trying to bring back the old school feel, you should have brought back a national title belt, not a U.S. title belt.
I think they were going for
title.
I think they were going for that nostalgic feel of like the guys like Ricky Steamboat and Paul Jones.
Yes.
And all these others that held that belt. And you're like, okay, I feel the nostalgia. But yeah, here's the deal. If you're going to bring in the world television title, which was the red and silver that we all know and love, you should have brought back the gold and silver of the national title.
True.
That Tully held, that Wahoo held, and use that belt because it was a more recognizable NWA. Because let's face it, the NWA, granted, being all regional and stuff like that, everybody who watched wrestling, who was old enough to watch it back then, saw this stuff. But it really got its limelight when Jim Crockett Promotions had it going.
Yes.
And a lot of the homage that they pay is JCP. Okay, let's just put it out there. It really is JCP that they're trying to homage.
And some of the viewers may not know, but I grew up in Charlotte, North Carolina, and was a personal friend for many years of Jackie Crockett, the youngest member of the Crockett family, who later on, when the company was sold to Ted Turner, later on went on to be a cameraman for the WCW. But backing up, you're right, they do pay a lot of homage to the Crockett, so you would think they would have, dotted that T or crossed that I.
Right. I mean, because honestly,
in that way,
as a true wrestling fan, if you're going for nostalgia, I've got to call you on it. You know what I mean? I got to sit there and say, hey, Billy Corgan, thank you for your thought and process, but rethink it. This is a perfect time, honestly.
Yes.
Change belts.
Yes.
It really is. Since they're not on right now, this is a perfect time to change belts. Right now, the current national heavyweight champion is Aaron Stevens. Okay. Let's when he comes back, let him have the classic national heavyweight title that they had before. That's what I say. I think it's a great thing. I don't mind the old school world tag titles, although the ones that were JCP held a lot of respect.
Which ones are you talking about? The ones with the blue strap?
Well, blue strap, and then later they changed it to a black strap. But the ones that were held by Tully and Arn, the Rock and Roll Express, they were belts that, much like the original WWF tag team titles that the Hart Foundation, that the Bulldogs held, the big gold belts, those titles held a lot of respect based on who held them, and at that time, what wrestling was back then. So honestly, I mean, I think paying homage and getting those old NWA titles, which, remember, they were used in TNA before TNA broke away from the NWA. They were using those NWA belts that were held by the Rock and Roll Express. And
absolutely, you're right.
They're beautiful belts, and they demand respect. And I think that's where I would want to go to. In other words, in 2020, to go back 40 years. It's nice, but bring it up a little bit. You know what I mean? Like, because in all honesty, those belts from 30 years ago and 35 years ago were definitely can hold up today more so than belts from 50 years ago.
True.
You know what I mean? That, in my opinion. It's just in my opinion.
Absolutely. And now that they're not running, they've got time to like rebrand call the belt maker, because I don't know if the fans know, but it usually takes them about 90 to 120 days to make a belt in most cases.
And right now it's actually taking a little longer because, as we saw in AEW with the TNT title, they weren't able to get the title finished in time for the television debut. So the belt is the beta version that they're using right now until such time that they can go ahead and get the newer plates in and stuff like that. And then one day, whoever the champion is at that time, be it Cody or whoever, will come out with this newer version of a TNT title. So it's one of those things where, we're kind of like behind the 8 ball a little bit, but let's take advantage of this time.
Yeah, and I think while you mentioned AEW, and this is not an AEW show, but I think we should take the time to mention here that Ricky Starks, formerly of the NWA, has recently signed with AEW and appeared this past week, as of this recording, on his first AEW taping. I unfortunately did not see the match.
Great match. It was a great match against Cody. He won for the TNT title. He is such a great talent, Ricky Starks. One could sit there and say, was the NWA kind of holding him back? They could definitely make that argument because he was really an outshining talent amongst the roster in the NWA. But let's face it, and this is what we're kind of getting into the show today, is the lack of shows because of the pandemic, the lack of preparation to say, how do we keep things going, was a big major factor. Now, I wasn't talking to Ricky Starks. I'm not working for the NWA. I don't know for sure, but 2 and 2 together makes 3. It makes 4. And it doesn't make 3. So in other words, it's one of those things where you can pretty much say, hey, someone that talented needs to be out there on television, needs to be working. Why not go to NXT or AEW since they're putting on shows on television?
Yes. Yeah. And not only that, but by going, a lot of the viewers may not know this, but since AEW is not running any what we call house shows that Vince McMahon calls live events, since AEW is not running any house shows, you only work for AEW usually twice a week. I say twice a week because they for a Thursday show, they fly in on a Wednesday.
Yes.
So you got to be ready to fly out on a Wednesday, and then you do the Thursday night show, and then you fly home either Thursday night or Friday, depending upon your
the only difference is there's a third day if there's a pay-per-view.
Yes, absolutely. I was about to bring that up, but I'm glad you did. Yeah. And so you really get paid like superstar money, but you really don't have to work that much. And to be honest, not to bash Billy Corrigan, but he said recently in an interview with, I forget the guy's name, it'll come to me in a minute, but another interviewer, that he doesn't have the money that a Tony Khan does. And so what Billy's challenge has got to be is Billy's got to get off the stick here. And I'm not bashing him. I'm just saying we got to get going here and get a TV contract. You cannot survive financially just on YouTube.
Well, let's stop you right there for a second, because at least having a YouTube presence, you're getting the name out, you're getting the brand out. People are seeing who these people are.
Yes.
People know who Zicky Dice is. People knew who Ricky Starks was. They even mentioned he's a former television champion on the promo for AEW. So the NWA did have light, and because Billy Corgan said there's more ways to watch any entertainment other than going on your cable TV or your national broadcasting. Okay, YouTube is a big thing. Mark Lindsay, your tag team partner on Point Counterpoint, he only watches YouTube. He has the YouTube Red. Yes. And he doesn't have cable. He watches television through YouTube Red because it's like it's a streaming service or whatever.
Yeah, I get that. What I meant was, I got to clarify myself here for a minute. I didn't mean that they were bad for going on YouTube. I just meant from a financial standpoint, they can't get that what they call TV rights fees to keep their talent.
My point is that we got word, and you can confirm this, but we got word that they weren't planning on putting out original, not I want to say original programming because they're putting out little shows here and there, but they're not putting
Yes.
out a wrestling program, aka NWA Power,
Yeah.
until January of 21.
That's true. I on this show, Breakout, report the news usually rather than
Yeah.
having a tag team partner, as you know. And I erroneously said 2020, but I meant to say January of 2021. And so that's going to be the
That's
problem.
6 months. That's
Yeah,
6
yeah.
months from now.
How can you expect this basically independent talent, for lack of a better term, to wait 6 months before you get going again? So
Yeah.
I think the only thing you can possibly do is take this 6 months to figure out, number one, who's going to replace Lagana, if anybody's going to replace him or if he's coming back at a later date, and B, try to get yourself, use your name recognition as Billy Corrigan from the Smashing Pumpkins to get your TV deal and start. And if you do get a TV
Well,
deal,
here's the deal. He's not
yeah,
going to get a TV deal with him being off any kind of programming for 6 months.
true.
That's not going to happen.
That brings up an
Yeah.
interesting point. Do you think, to your point, do you think he could maybe put together a synopsis, like we call in TV, a demo tape of the Power program and say, this is what I've got to offer?
Well, I always said that since Turner opened themselves back up to wrestling by bringing on AEW and Tony Khan, right?
Yes, right.
On TNT, right?
Yes.
Why can Billy Corrigan go to Turner and get Power back on Saturday nights at 6:05 on TBS?
Oh my God. Do you know?
Right or wrong? I mean, that's where I would go. If I would go anywhere, that's where I would go. I wouldn't even care about Channel 3, 6, and 10, NBC, CBS. I wouldn't care about CW. I wouldn't care about Fox. Now, granted, can they give you more exposure in some cases? Sure. But if you want to stick with nostalgia, if you want to stick with what you're trying to make this NWA out of, you go back to TBS. You do Saturday 6:05. It doesn't even have to be a 2-hour program. It can still be an hour. Because
Yes.
they Power does pack an hour full of stuff. It's really nice.
Yes.
It's really good. And just, I think he's in a better place to do that now that AEW is doing so well for
Yes.
TNT than it was before the contract was dry on
Yeah.
AEW. You know what I mean? So I mean that's what I would go for, but you're gonna have a problem keeping your talent.
Yeah.
Because you're not working for the next 6 months. Okay, you're going to have a problem. Now, granted, they probably are able to do whatever they want to do. They're probably very loose with these guys because of they're probably. It's not like AEW or WWE where they're getting paid so much money, and we have these strict contracts. They're probably saying, "Hey, let's keep it open for these guys so they're able to go back and forth how they want. Maybe they can go to Japan and wrestle or what have you." But they have a studio there. They could have done an empty studio show every week.
Yeah. Now I realize Dave Lagana's gone, and you haven't seen the last episode of a program they called Inside the NWA on YouTube.
No.
But in the last show of Inside the NWA on YouTube, Dave Lagana said, well, we really didn't want to do any NWA Power shows without fans. I can understand where he's coming from, but an NWA show with no fans is better than no NWA show at all.
Because you're losing the fans that are not there. He's got to understand, if he's got 50 fans in that studio, he's got millions of fans watching.
Yeah, yeah.
And that's where you're negating. You're negating the millions of fans for those so-called 50 fans. And I don't think that's a good idea at all.
Exactly.
I mean, and understand though too, he wouldn't be standing out in the crowd in a negative light because nobody has fans right now.
Exactly.
Okay?
And nobody has fans. And if you want to do some ambiance, do like AEW does. Put the rest of the damn locker room as your fans.
There you go. Why not?
Yes.
WWE jumped on that.
Yes. And
the Performance Center, but I mean, they jumped on that because they figured, oh shit, this really actually does make it look better and sound better and what have you,
True. And not only that, I think while we're talking about the negative effects of COVID, even though this is not NWA related. An NXT performer whose name I forget has come down with the coronavirus. And
Okay.
also, I read on the internet shortly before the taping here that we're doing that Kevin Owens, aka
Yes.
Kevin Steen is his real name, came down with the coronavirus. So that might
Mhm.
put a damper in some people's fan. But I mean, you from NWA perspective, you got some momentum with the NWA title and the NWA name again, and you've been on various wrestling shows, you've been on various morning shows that had nothing to do with wrestling and all this, and now you've lost this momentum. Danny, as a person that's been around this business just as long as I have, how do you get that momentum back once they start back? Because every day that passes, they're losing that momentum.
You're starting back at zero, and I hate to say that, but you really, really are. I mean, granted, not maybe zero, maybe at 5. You know what I mean? I'm going to give you just a couple numbers up because
Yeah.
people know Power existed. People
True.
were watching it. Now, not everybody watched it. You recently had Johnny McIntyre on. He was not a fan, although he's a fan of the NWA. He was not a
Yes.
fan of Power. He just wasn't into it. But he's younger.
Yes.
He's younger than me by minimally 10 years. So his exposure to WCW Saturday Night was very limited and was very, let's face it, was much more overly produced than what you and I grew up with watching.
True.
Yeah,
True.
you know what I mean? Because like
Yes.
they were,
And even
Saturday Night towards the end
yes.
was a pretty big show. Even
Yeah.
though it wasn't popular anymore, and they weren't even promoting it half-ass, which it was a sad ending. It was like it got cancer and died almost.
Yeah.
Like Saturday,
Exactly.
really, it's a sin. But that was the show. That was
Exactly.
the equal to what Raw is to the WWE.
Yeah, and even my tag team partner on Point Counterpoint and our mutual friend of the show, Mark Lindsay,
Yeah.
said that he only started watching Crockett in 87, and Crockett
87.
ended.
Yeah.
Yeah, Crockett ended in 88. So anything I talk about, like I recently had a conversation with him about George Scott as an example, and Byron Scott, George's son,
Yeah.
and George was the booker for the Crockett's back in the 70s, and he said, well, if we do that show, you're going to have to take the lead on it. I said, I don't mind. Well, I'll take the lead on that.
I don't know why I keep him on the payroll. Mark Lindsay. No, I just because nobody's on the payroll. There's no money in the show.
Exactly. You got that right, buddy. Tony Khan, please call us and
Yes,
give us
please.
a job so we can make some money. But getting back to the topic at hand,
I'll cancel everything on this network if I get that call from Tony Khan.
Yeah. Cancel the DJB Productions Network
I'll delete
immediately.
the whole thing.
Who the hell cares about the man cave and anything else?
Like,
It
I'm
can go
out.
straight to hell. Yeah, exactly. But getting back to the topic at hand before we have to close here,
Yeah.
I agree with you. I do think that they're losing some momentum here, and I think the momentum they're losing is a totally separate issue from the fact that they may continue to lose talent, because you got to remember, most of this talent survives on other bookings, and if the talent has to go and get a regular job or whatever, they might say, well, instead of going to get a regular job, I'll just go to WWE if I can, or I'll go to NXT, or I'll go to Ring of Honor, because Ring of Honor has put out that they're starting back at the beginning of next month and so forth.
Now, granted, we're saying stuff now. Florida's opened back up, so there are difference in things. Like they're in Georgia, they film out of Georgia. So I'm personally, I do not know the state of this of Georgia in all of this, like whether or not they're not letting anything happen. I do not know, because if you go back a little further, when AEW, when they were in what was that, Jackson's Place or wherever they're at now?
Daly's Place in Jackson.
Daly's Place in there. They only could do a couple shows, and then Florida said no, you can't, because remember they had to go back to they had to go back to what's his name's training center to do a couple
QT Marshall's training center in
Georgia. Now, granted, that's Georgia, so I'm assuming the NWA should be able to run a show in the studio without any kind of problem, but I don't physically know that. So there might be things outside of it. I would hope that would be the scenario, to give it a proper
Yeah.
answer. But I
Yeah.
don't think logically, and I think you and I both agree that the vision needs to be modified. One thing you need to be able to do, I think, in life is you assess, you reestablish, and then you move forward. What does a GPS do whenever you're off track? It finds a
E-
new route,
Exactly.
and that's what you have to
Yeah.
do. I mean, your destination can still be the same, but maybe you have to go right, go left, go down, go up. You can't just sit there and say, oh, well, it's either this or nothing, because I think you're going to lose fans, honestly. And guys like Zicky Dice and Nick Aldous, these are
Yes.
guys that you have to see. I think they're
Yes.
phenomenal talents. James Storm and Eli Drake are great together as a tag team.
Oh, absolutely. And even Royce Isaacs and Tom Latimer. The only
They're
thing I do,
phenomenal. Yeah.
yeah. Um, and one negative I think is from old school people like us is even though the NWA is putting out content on YouTube, not just the inside the NWA show,
Yeah.
but they're doing something with Tim Storm about history because he's a history teacher in real life,
Right.
and they're doing Carney Land, which I hate. Have you
Right.
seen Carney Land? It's atrocious.
I haven't watched any program.
Oh, please,
Not
please.
one program I haven't watched it because I have no interest. I really don't.
You are a man with children and 2 regular jobs besides doing this. Don't
Yeah.
waste your time
Yeah.
watching it. Take my word of
Right.
advice there.
Yeah.
Carney Land is a bunch of comedy. It's basically like a bad version of WWE Raw. Okay,
There
so
you
don't
go.
waste your time.
There you go.
But what I'm trying to get at is the NWA. I realize they're putting out content to try to keep their name out there. But I think if you're going to put out content to keep your name out there, you need to put out content that's specifically more along the lines of with the NWA vision. And I don't think they're doing that right now, even though they are putting out content.
Well, I think
Um,
a lot of them are getting I want to say nervous. Like you mentioned earlier, we mentioned Zicky Dice. I've been in talks with Zicky Dice to come on That Way Cool Wrestling show, and we're still going through those negotiations and stuff like that. But he has his own show now because every one of these guys are doing what they need to do to keep their name out there.
yeah.
And before we go, I wanted to talk to you about this real
Yeah.
quick. We mentioned I saw a meme the other day. Nick Aldis 606 days as the NWA World Heavyweight Champion.
Yeah.
Zicky Dice is the World Television Champion. Now hasn't defended it in 3 months.
Exactly. So do you really count those days?
Do we count these off days? Do we sit there and say your days are going to stop as of when the last match you wrestled, and it'll pick up as it and just erase everything in between? Because I mean, here's the rule is like, well, it's all kayfabe, but the rule is 30 days. You can't defend. You have to vacate the title, blah, blah, blah.
Yeah.
But let's sit there and say, all right, these are extenuating circumstances. The entire industry is at a halt. So I think it's a clean slate. I think it's one of those things. I would not vacate all titles and start a whole brand new thing again. I think that would be going backwards. But I would not sit there and say, hey, yeah, Zicky Dice, man, he held that title for a year and a half. Yeah, 7 months of it was on vacation.
Yeah.
I mean, I can't go with. I can't get behind it.
I get your point. Before Lagana resigned this week, though, he was on Inside the NWA, which was taped last week, I think.
Yeah.
And they were saying that they were counting part of Nick Aldis's days as the COVID days. So I think they're doing it. Yeah. Which I'm like you. I don't find that to be really.
I mean, unless he's defending against Mickie in the house somewhere, I'll pay to watch that.
Yes, indeed. And just in case the
I'll
viewers
pay for that.
just in case the viewers don't know, Nick Aldis is married to Mickie James, and I just found a picture.
That lucky son of a bitch.
I know. I just found a picture of me and her together last night at an autograph signing that I met her a couple of years ago. I'll bring it on the show one day.
That Way Cool Wrestling show was at Icons of Wrestling in Philadelphia at the famous ECW Arena.
Okay.
And Mickie was there amongst other stars and stuff like that. And I walked by her a couple of times, and she's this short little girl. She's only about 5'3".
Yes.
And she's the hottest thing I've ever seen in my life.
Oh my God.
She's gorgeous. She's gorgeous.
You are telling me. And you know how I feel about a good friend of the program here, Cindy Snow. But having said that, if there's anybody that could give Cindy Snow a run for her money, it would be Mickie James. And I've met her, and she's just the nicest person.
She seems that way. Yeah. I never
that you'd
met her
ever
personally.
want to meet. It's
Yeah.
just very nice. In fact, I'm hoping one day she'll leave the WWE and come to NWA. It would be nice to see some sort of feud between her and Camille, since Camille is sort of like
Yeah.
a Nick Aldous.
Or maybe her and Melina.
Yeah,
Do some
something
stuff
like
again.
that.
Yeah. You know.
But now let's go back to one other thing before we close the show out here, because I know we're on time here. But do you see any hope for the NWA getting the TV contract? I'm sorry to keep harping on that, but I think they need that TV contract in order to hold their talent. And if they can't hold their
I'm
talent,
going to venture to say, if any TV taping goes through it all, if they get anything right, if the schedule that they're putting out there sticks and COVID doesn't come back to bother anybody, I would venture to say you're not going to see anything until 22 at the earliest.
Well, then that goes back to your earlier point. How do you hold the talent then? You can't just say, here's a podcast on YouTube. Go have fun.
Granted, you know how you hold the talent with this. You pay them. You pay them. I mean, that's simple as that. But the thing is, though, if the NWA in your mind as a talent is not going in a direction anytime soon that you want to, wrestling is a gone tomorrow before it came today type of business. And what I mean by that is that it's so fast paced and it's so what's the next thing happening that it's almost like an iPhone. When you buy an iPhone, it's already outdated by the time you get it out of the box. You understand what I'm saying? And that's what wrestling is about. I mean, even in 2020, that's what wrestling's about. And we've gone back and forth, sports entertainment versus pro wrestling. They're two different products, etc. But you know what? Both are at the same pace. Both are at the same pace. You cannot be slow moving in the world of professional wrestling. You can't. And therefore, what happens is these guys like Ricky Starks, I need to go and make myself a big name. You know, I'm not doing it here. And that's what
but
happens.
Wait a minute. With all due respect, my good friend, did you not just contradict yourself? Didn't you just say a minute ago, pay the talent? Okay, so you pay the talent.
I'm saying that's how you try to keep them.
Okay.
Yeah.
But you pay the talent, so you keep them in one sense. But if the talent's not out there wrestling, don't they get a little restless and say, wait a minute, even though I'm making money over here in the NWA pot, I need to keep my face out there as a brand, so I need to go wrestle.
Well, there's a double-edged sword because, one, you don't know how long the money's going to come in. Because let's face it, is it financially stable or responsible to pay talent to sit at home with their families?
Probably not.
As bad as that sounds morally, it's a business. And as a business, pandemic or no pandemic or whatever, I cannot survive if I'm shoveling money out and I don't have any money coming in.
Because even though Billy Corgan is Billy Corgan of the Smashing Pumpkins and a millionaire,
he can't play because there's no concerts.
Exactly.
You see what I'm saying?
So from a financial perspective, it comes down to, does he want to lose money until this pandemic is over? And at the time of the recording of this show, we don't even know when the pandemic is going to end. Yes.
That's right. If you watch the movie Ghostbusters, when he wanted to take out Dana as their new client, he said, well, unfortunately, this fantastic feast, which was a bunch of Chinese food, was the last of the petty cash. And unfortunately, I think the petty cash is going to start to come to fruition very soon with the NWA, because it's going to be like, you know what? We can't pay to have the studio anymore. We can't pay to do this. We can't pay to do that. We can't pay to do these little sideshows. Pretty soon, Carneyland is going to cost too much money. Pretty soon, 10 pounds of gold is going to cost too much money. You see what I'm saying? And I know for a fact that Billy Corgan is robbing Peter to pay Paul in some cases when he goes out, he buys the NWA, and what's he do? He goes out on tour with Smashing Pumpkins. He needs money in there. He needs to bring that money in. God bless him. He's investing his money, time, and effort into that company.
Yes.
So he's doing what he can to make it something, and I salute you for it. but it's such a losing battle, or it's such an uphill battle, I should say.
Yeah,
And
yeah,
it's hard to stay afloat.
yeah. And then to make matters worse, I know we got to wrap this up like at
Yes.
45. We're at 39 now, but
Yeah.
we'll wrap it up at 45 for the viewers at home. But what I'm saying is, to make matters worse, his partner that started him in all this, David Lagana, is, as of the taping, is no longer there with him due to the harassment allegations. Lagana resigned this week, and
Okay.
so now he not only has to find out where do you get more money, but how do you find another sort of technical guy to shoot the stuff that knows your vision. I mean, yes, there are a bunch of people in
Well,
the
being a rock star and making music videos
yes,
and making concerts, I would think that he has access to a lot of video producers and directors.
yes.
I would think more so than somebody that's on a business end that's got to
But
look
I
into the
truly
industry.
believe,
But
though, even though you
yeah.
can find another TV video person,
Mhm.
all you got to do is put an ad somewhere if you need to.
Yeah.
I'm not sure you can find a video person that could shoot wrestling or have the same
As
vision.
someone that shot wrestling myself, that was a lot of my career in professional wrestling. Like you're absolutely right in saying, unless that person knows what your vision is, he's not going to be able to he's not going to perceive it himself, and he's not going to be able to convey it to the audience because he's the middleman. He's the middleman above anything else.
Yeah, I truly hope that they find some way to bring. Lagana's the one that ran Jim Cornette out the door, so I don't want to be saying this because I hated Lagana for doing that. I think the reasons that Jim Cornette was gone were petty and
I think
everything
it
like.
was. I think that was an over. That was an over. What am
Reaction.
or overreaction to
Yes.
something that was classic Jim Cornette. Jim Cornette, at least publicly, does not come off as a racist or anything like that. He's a smart ass guy from
Yes.
the South who says funny things. And unfortunately, we live in a world that honestly I believe sucks. I think we live in a world that sucks. And the reason why it sucks is not because people are insulting other people and stuff like that. It's because people are getting insulted. And that's where I think it is. I'm not someone that goes out and hurts somebody's feelings or anything like that. But you and I know offline, I'm a very colorful comedy guy. Okay.
Yeah.
And I say a lot of funny shit. But I never have bad intent to anybody because I wasn't brought up that way. And
True.
the same thing with Jim Cornette. Jim Cornette's a funny guy, and he said some funny things. And unfortunately, Southern humor, and it is I want to say racy, but I want to say it's something that like you're like you're right on that fence. You know what I mean? And that's what he was. And don't dare get rid of Cornette. But on WWE Raw, you got an old lady giving birth to a hand, where the father is a 400-pound black guy.
Yeah, exactly.
You know what I mean, stop. Just stop it. You know.
Go figure that. So I agree with you. I think that was overreacting. But having said all that, I'm hoping that these new allegations against Lagana that were sexual harassment in nature, we won't repeat those, but that were sexual harassment in nature, I hope they can get resolved and he can come back. Because even though I don't like Lagana for running Cornette off, from a fan perspective, Lagana knew exactly what Billy Corrigan's vision wanted to be for the NWA, and I think everybody should put their pride aside and do what, to use a Vince McMahon term, do what's best for business and bring Lagana back, and let's restart this NWA before we lose any more traction. I think one of the things they could do is maybe go back to Ring of Honor, since Ring of Honor is starting up next month, and try to do a co-promotion like they did with NWA before.
Here's what happens, and it's going to be one of the things where it always comes down to money. But if you're going to sit there and say, hey, you know what, we're going to end relationships with Ring of Honor because we're the NWA, and we're a little bit better than you, and we're a little bit bigger than you, and then you come back later and say, hey, I'm really sorry. I said all those things. You know what I mean? It's like there's only so much where Ring of Honor is going to be like, right there, buddy.
Yeah, exactly.
Take your U.S. national heavyweight title and shove it up your ass. That's what they're going to say. I mean, honestly, so they have to adjust.
Yes.
And realign. That's what they need to do. They better put out shows before 2021, or I think I'll watch it. When it comes on, I'm going to watch it. I'm an NWA fan, but you know what, though? Me going on there is not going to make you successful because I'm one guy.
Yeah.
It's that simple. You know what I mean?
Well, and when you say shows, you mean shows that are not Carney Land.
I'm talking wrestling. I want NWA Power back on the air, and I don't give a shit if there's a fan in that building or not, because you know what? They're 35, 40 feet away from their commentators.
Yeah.
So those guys can talk it up and be loud, and that's it. You understand? They don't need clapping. They don't need stuff like that, especially in a studio format. They don't.
But here's the problem with that. In the other part of the problem is the shows were taped at Georgia Public Broadcasting in Atlanta.
Yes.
Meaning they were renting the space from Georgia Public Broadcasting, the public broadcasting affiliate for Atlanta, Georgia down there. So there might be some unwritten rule with Georgia Public Broadcasting to say, well, we can't have anybody in the studio to even taping. We can't allow you to rent our studios until the pandemic is over.
You want to do something? You want to do something original? You want to do something and bring it back? Do some outdoor wrestling.
Yeah, there you go.
Go to somebody's private residence and set up a wrestling ring in the yard. Tape during the day when it's bright out.
Yeah.
And do shows like that.
Yeah, do something to bring.
There's your alternative.
Pro wrestling content back.
There's your alternative. It would look like WCCW back in the day at Texas Stadium.
Yeah. Yeah, I agree with you.
I'm waiting for my check.
Yeah.
I'm waiting for my check.
Yes. Tony Khan called us. Billy Corrigan says this is an NWA show. Hope you see it. Call us. We'll work for you. Anything. But Danny, looks like we got to close it out here. We're at the 46-minute mark, so we'll close it out. But before we close it out, let's say that we hope to have some NWA people on in the future. Maybe Byron Scott, who was an NWA referee, and maybe Gene Ligon, Tommy Angel, and some other folks. But beyond that, let's also do the programming plug here. I usually do it, but since you're the architect of DJB Productions, I'm going to yield to you and say, do the programming plug this week.
Sounds good. Well, obviously, you can see my good friend here, Rusty Loudermuck, on WCW.
WCW.
On WCW, yes. That's what I want
What
to say.
the hell?
On That Way Cool Wrestling Show Breakout, which is what this program is. He's also on That Way Cool Wrestling Show Presents Point Counterpoint with Mark Lindsay. We also have That Way Cool Wrestling Show, which is the granddaddy of them all. It's the Starcade of my network, is That Way Cool Wrestling Show. But I also have DJs After Dark. I have Messing with the McIntyres. I have DJs After Dark. I got the Man Cave with Big Vito LaGrasso of WCW and WWE and ECW. I have you seen it lately with Matt Sunner, where he talks about different shows that you might not have seen in a while. Maybe they're like cult classics. It's a really cool show if you like movies and stuff like that. And
I don't think I've seen that one, by the way.
Well, then
have
you
you seen it lately?
It's at the bottom of the list. And then when you then go in, and we also have Capes Not Included, which stars a number of different guys from the network here. And we talk about nerd stuff, superheroes and toys and all kinds of stuff. And it's a great stuff. There's a lot of programming on here. Hit the subscribe button down below. Hit the notification bell on the playlist that you like. I'm telling you, you're going to find something on here. This is unique to YouTube because other than other shows on YouTube, I provide different shows of different genres for everybody. It's not just one genre. This is not a wrestling channel.
But before we close out, I can't remember because you ran down the long list of programming. It's a wonder you have time to.
Oh, and I forgot one. Yeah, I forgot one.
Yeah.
Comic Book Wednesdays with Bob Taylor is another one on there. So.
Yeah. Well, what about the Man Cave with Big Vito?
I mentioned it. You just missed it.
Okay. All right. Sorry about that. Sorry about that. Please don't beat me up, Vito.
I'll let him know.
But the point is, there's a lot of great programming here, and it's all done with a labor of love. In case you don't know, unless they're slipping some money under the table here, nobody gets paid for any of this. We do it because we love to bring content to you. So the point is, it's not just wrestling. It's a bunch of different things. And
I'm not looking for awes and cries and pats on the backs or anything like that. But I do, honestly, like you said, I work two full jobs. I'm also a disc jockey, which right now DJing is non-existent right now during the pandemic, but that's like my third job. And then I do this all on my own time, my free time, producing 8 shows on my free time. So it is a major labor of love. I just want everybody to subscribe to it. It's so easy to subscribe. You just hit the button. We don't inundate anybody with anything. If you don't hit a notification bell, you're not being bothered with emails and stuff like that. But hit one, you'll know when a show comes out, and we have great content. So I urge you to jump on here, subscribe, and share the channel.
And beyond that, beyond subscribing and everything, tell the people to watch the shows. Don't just subscribe and get the shows. Watch them.
Yeah.
And you'll like them. But anyway, as the old saying goes, the old clock on the wall is telling me, Rusty, that's about all. So we'll probably need to close it out here and tell you to join us here each week with That Way Cool Wrestling Show Breakout, which will be your latest news in what's going on in the world of pro wrestling. And we'll try to have some guests on in the future just to break up the news format from time to time. And thank you very much, Danny J, not only for appearing with me this week, but for every week, because the people might not know, you're the one that pushes the buttons and get me up on the air each week. And I thank you for not only this week, but for all the past weeks and for the opportunity of doing the show. So thank you for all you do. And until then, folks, keep it right here, same time, same channel next week for That Way Cool Wrestling Show. Everybody stay safe, and I always say, keep pro wrestling alive, everybody. Take care.
Thank you for listening to That Way Cool Wrestling Show Breakout. We'll see you at the matches. Goodbye, everybody.